Hello everybody, it's Tommy and welcome back to another speed build for the Disney Save. Today's video is definitely a long one. This ended up being such a huge build and it was really unexpected considering that this is just kind of like a medium-sized residential. I knew there would be a lot of cluttering and a lot of like little detail work to do from the film, but I was not expecting how long this build truly actually took me. I made some changes to it and I made it kind of a more expansive build, so it ended up taking me significantly longer than I originally planned. But regardless of that, you guys usually like the longer videos, so I hope you enjoy today's. We are building the house, the primary residence from Luca. This is Giulia and Masimo's home, that being her father. He also runs some sort of a fish shop on the bottom floor, and you never get to see that in the film, but I did have to decorate the entire space as such. It is also an Italian style residential where you are essentially sharing walls with some of your neighbors. So the house itself is attached to a few other buildings, and I've seen this build done before very well, by the way. I've seen it on YouTube, other Sims creators. Like, it's definitely one of those ones that's very colorful, bright, and it has a lot of clutter and really great references, so it inspires builders to want to create this, and I totally get it. But something that I noticed is that people tend to build just Giulia's house, and it doesn't give the full vibe of the area. It also makes it feel maybe just a little bit out of place in Tartosa specifically, which is something I am always personally trying to do alongside of like recreating the films and all of the things. If I can make a build blend into an area and have it fit really well in the world that I've chosen for that building, it works a lot better in my opinion. So I wanted to make this feel like some of those debug houses that you see around Tartosa that make up really like the town village area and the town center. Those are all the same style, colors, cut, and they have that attached look to them where a lot of the buildings are just in one big chunk, kind of going around a certain area, and then you'll get a break either for a pathway or a walkthrough, or just like a break in general, and then you'll have another cluster of buildings. So this is no exception. Her home is attached to several other buildings at the end of a block towards the water. So this was the perfect lot to do this. It's also a very large lot, so wasting the space by just doing her house didn't feel right to me, considering that I usually have the opposite problem, which is that I don't have enough room to do everything I'd like to do. I had the complete opposite problem for this one. I had too much space, and leaving just her house on the lot by itself would have made it feel like such a waste to me personally. So I did decide to do the attached buildings. They are obviously not shown in like detail as far as what they're supposed to be. We can assume that some of them are residential because of the fact that hers is a residential and it's located over a commercial building. So I thought we could do some of the other buildings and have them be set up to become residential rentals. Now, I'm not currently implementing residential rentals into the Disney Save because it essentially, there's too many bugs, there's corruption, there's issues with doing it. So I am not using the lot type for now, but I'm setting this up for the possibility of it being used as a residential in the future. The thought is, with every world, I would like there to be what I used to do is just like a rental, so that you could play there with a random sim, your sim self, or you just have space to maybe like bulldoze a lot and put something there that's a little bit more personal or change some things around. It depends on how you want to play with the save, but essentially, like, I like to fill every single lot in the save, give you some characters to play with, nothing is left blank. But there still has to be maybe some give and take, like some room for you to move characters around or move your own sims in. So residential rentals are a really great idea for the Disney Save. It helps solve a lot of problems, and because of the state of the game right now, I'm not using them, but we can set things up for the future so that you can use it the way that it's intended. So the buildings next door are all fully decorated apartments, some of them much larger than others. I did everything from like a full-size, very large, multi-generational family home to some small studio apartments, and then additionally there is another like pretend commercial on the lot. Not all of that is shown in today's video because it was honestly a ton of decorating that is very much like all my own and outside of the build itself and outside of the movie. So most of what you're going to be seeing today is just Giulia's house and the details that go along with that. But the other buildings are there. They're very heavily decorated and themed to match furniture that I felt like went really well with like the coastal vibes. There's a little bit of nautical theming. There's also like Tartosa in and general decorations, and then that vibe of like Italian style architecture. That being said, they are decorated so you can get the vibe of who would be living there, and you can see how they're meant to be set up as far as how many families can live in a given building. But I also didn't want to heavily decorate them. This is already a really large lot with a lot of exterior clutter and lots of decorating, so it became like a really big lot really quickly. And I feel like when it comes to apartments, when you're trying to make a space that is just supposed to be for pretty much anybody, like I want you to be able to pick who could move in there, I don't like to overly theme it. It doesn't really help with the situation, but you can tell who's supposed to live in each one. It just doesn't have like a ton of clutter. You can tell where everything's placed down, where the kitchen is, where the living room is meant to be, maybe like the types of people that sort of live there, but only just barely. Minimal clutter, minimal decoration. So if you feel like it's a little bit barren when you download it compared to this main house, it definitely is. It's not as lived in. There are definitely supposed to be more generic looking apartments. I'll explain the apartments a little bit more as we go throughout the video and they kind of come to life. You'll see a little bit of them to the right of Julia's home, but like I mentioned, most of the decorating for them will not be in the video today because it's not really the point. I just wanted to explain the rest of the lot so you get the vibe of everything else that's going on here. Now, Julia's house is luckily the one on the end. It's very unique. It has its own yard on the side there, and it has a tree house in the yard that Luca and Alberto actually sleep in. So this was a really great opportunity to finally use that new item. I think it comes from the Growing Together pack. I have not used this item because it's so specific in what it actually is. It's a tree house, right? And there's other places in the Disney Save where I've implemented the idea of a tree house. Like, for example, the Lost Boys all live in like essentially a tree house of sorts. They live underground technically, but they like enter through the tree house. So it was thought to possibly use it on that lot, but I opted not to because essentially like the general living area was all underground and I needed to be able to do bedrooms and decorate things very specifically to match it from the movie. But in this instance, Alberto and Luca do not have bedrooms. They very much sleep in like this really crummy treehouse outside of Julia's room. It has a couple of planks and some pillows on it. Even the one that I've used in the video today is way more done up than the one that they have in the film. It's like this tree that's in the side yard that literally has like one piece of wood on it that's exposed completely to the elements, and she gives them some pillows to use. It has like one branch that goes to and from her bedroom window, and that's it. So having the lights and the telescope that I eventually put there and the little shed that protects them from the weather is already way more than they get. So this was a really cool opportunity to use that item. They can both sleep in there. I was worried at first that maybe you would have to switch off, like when can Luca sleep and when can Alberto sleep, but I've already play tested it and they both can go in and sleep at the same time, which is really cool. So they will essentially use that as their bedroom, which is great. It means I didn't have to decorate a bedroom for either of them, and that's awesome because they don't have one in the film, so it works out perfectly. And then Julia has her room in the house because it is actually her home, and her father also has a bedroom. His bedroom is not shown in the film, but I was able to find some art, I believe from some other like Disney resources, where I found like official Luca art of his bedroom. So I was able to recreate it even though it's not shown in the film. And then like I mentioned, that bottom floor is actually the dad's fish store. So he catches fish, sells them, sells fishing equipment of sorts, and that bottom floor is totally reserved just for that, and then the stairs that you would enter to the rest of the home from. I'm really glad that I have come so far as a builder compared to the early days of the Disney Save. I've learned so much, and I feel like honed on a lot of my talents. Like I just understand how to build in this game a lot better than I used to. This build wouldn't have come out even close to as good as I am currently presenting it if I had done this like a year and a half ago. I used to have such a problem with space and understanding how large or how small to make things. I still think I struggle with this from time to time, but I tend to build a lot bigger than I need or think I need a lot more room than I do. So when I saw this lot, I already thought it was going to be too small essentially to build this house. Only when I started building did I realize that not only was it not too small, but I had room to do several other apartments. I think I did 5 or 6 other apartments total, and it's too big even for what I built. I ended up having to do a lot of decorating to blend in the rest of the lot with the surrounding area and make it feel more more a part of the town and have lots of clutter and things that are kind of like around the build for characters to be doing, because otherwise it just looked really out of place. Like too much greenery, just not fitting into the vibes of Luca at all. And something that I understand a lot better now that I live in Europe is that the houses, like my brain used to be very much catered towards building spaces around like the sizing of American homes. So just in general, American houses and American apartments tend to be a lot more spacious than what I have personally experienced here in England. And also from a little bit of travel I've done as well, there is just a different way that houses are built in Europe, and there isn't as much room. There's not as much room to walk around. There are not as many like spaces for like random decorations and things like that. Everything is very essential and things tend to be more confined. Like your dining room and your kitchen will be in the same space. There is a door on the kitchen area. So I understand like a lot better how to do something like this, whereas a while ago I might not have. And immediately when I started building Giulia's house, I really wanted to make sure that it was small inside, because the idea is that it's really cluttered and kind of tight. You can even see this in the movie when the characters are walking around. They tend to like knock into furniture and things, and you can just tell there isn't a lot of like walkway space. And that's very true to a lot of European housing. Obviously that's not going to be true across the board, but in this instance it's a really perfect example of that. Now sometimes this is really tricky because obviously I'm building in a game where this needs to be functional. So even if I wanted to make this so crammed that the characters are essentially having to step over and kind of walk around furniture, that's not going to play super well. So it does have to be even just a little bit bigger than what you would probably think, but it doesn't have to be as big as like an American size house. That being said, I have noticed like there's some little changes I've gone back into Willow Creek to make somewhat recently, but also like I had that big update to the Disney save. So one of those things that I did is go over every single one of my builds and fix them and change some of those things that I used to not notice as an amateur builder, but now I do realize that I was doing. And one of the bigger projects that I am going to be taking on in the next few months, hopefully, is changing the LaBeouf mansion in Willow Creek. It is a mansion, and it's supposed to be huge, and I think especially for characters like the LaBeoufs, it makes a ton of sense for it to be absolutely massive and just like way over the top, especially compared to everything else around it. But I also think it's way, way, way too big, even for all of that being said. So I'm going to be downsizing that mansion quite a bit. It's a big project to take on. It's going to require me to essentially rebuild the mansion in some areas and hopefully remove some of the floors and things. So I am already preparing, or I guess that's why I haven't taken it on like right away once I noticed that it was an issue, because I just know it's going to take me like maybe a couple weeks to take care of. I'm hoping to include that in the next download for the Disney save, but I'm not quite sure if it will be ready. I have a running list of some changes and some things I need to fix. Sometimes you guys pop into my Discords and let me know little things that are broken or not working, or people make suggestions that I didn't really think of until after. So I have like this running list that I keep where I'm going to be running through the list before I do a big update. And I'm hoping that all of that comes with the Tartosa update at the same time. We will see. Some of them are bigger projects than others. I also want to make the Emperor's Palace in Mount Komorebi a residential option as well by adding a basement level and doing some bedrooms and things. And that's also a pretty big project, so we will see if that ends up happening or not. It will definitely happen. It's just a matter of like if I should take the time to do it now or later and put it out with a different update. And I might do some of it now and then some of it later is kind of how it works out, but you will see. I always update Patreon just to show you guys some things, and when the Disney Save download goes live, there is a section at the bottom that tells you why there is a new version available, whether it's going to be a full new version with a new world or there's some little changes and updates that I've made. There is like a patch notes thing at the very bottom of the listing. So if you're ever curious, that is there. Giulia's bedroom was really exciting for me to do. Again, it was making sure that there was kind of a crammed look to this space. I think I've even made her bedroom larger than she has it in the film. Like, she is literally walking over her stuff constantly, and there's a scene where her and Luca are in here and they're talking, and she kind of like dances around in front of her door and she's moving and running into furniture a bit, and you can tell that she has no space in here, but you have to make this functional. So I need a couple tiles in front of the bed to make sure she can actually get to it. I need her to be able to get to her desk to sit down, so I have to make it just a little bit bigger than what I would have liked, but it still has that crammed feeling, and it's still a lot smaller than I normally would build. Julia tends to be more tomboy leaning. She seems to have an interest in biking and sports. She definitely has an interest in fishing with her dad, and I think that she does do a little bit of traveling. Her dad and her mom are separated, and she does say that she goes to live with her mom for the school year, and you can see at the end of the film that she gets on a train, so presumably she lives somewhat far away from her dad. We don't know if it's a different country or a different place, or if it's just like a train away, but regardless, she does a little bit of traveling. You can see some suitcases in her bedroom, you can see little backpacks full of clothes. She's one of those kids that goes back and forth. Even though she gets to stay, luckily, in one place for the whole summer, she is a child of separation and one of those kids that has to like pack a bag and go back and forth. So I have that's why that kind of contributes to like the cluttering of her room and some of her stuff being in suitcases and book bags and things like that. She also seems to be academically interested. She has some books specifically related to space, and she likes to use the neighbor's telescope, and she does talk about being interested in that, and that's something that helps bond her with Luca because he has a huge interest in the stars as well. So I wanted to put some little space theming in the bedroom and see if I could find some textbooks that are astronomy related, things like that. We have some really cool new crafted items from the Growing Together pack, and they are these like larger sculpture-y type of pieces that are made out of cardboard, or it looks like toys have been kind of duct taped together to make new things. I love using them. I think they're some of the coolest items that we got in that pack, and it's really unique for children because of course like you have toys and there's lots of toys that kids can have, but when you're leaning towards these characters that are a little bit older, where Julia is in the save, she's going to be a teen. If you didn't see the last video, all of the Luca characters have to be teens because I have to make Luca and Alberto be able to be mermaids, and unfortunately the child life state in The Sims 4 does not allow you to functionally use mermaids. So I did have to, I think, age them up a little bit from what they are shown to be in the film. Disney Wiki listed them as teenagers, being like 12 or 13. I think that that's definitely true, but I also think they don't physically look 12 or 13. They look a little bit more around like the 10, 11 range. The way I described it in the last video is that there's always that one transitional summer for children where they go from being children to teenagers, and I think that that is very much the vibe for them in this, because the decisions and the story that has to happen throughout the film becomes a little bit more of an adult situation, and having to like be kind to friends is like the general theming, but the decisions that get made in the film start to lean towards becoming an adult and aging a little bit. So all that being said, Julia wouldn't necessarily have a ton of toys around her room, like putting a toy chest in, although she would probably have it just from aging out of it. Wasn't super appropriate for the use of the space, but there had to be other clutter items, and I could totally see her being into crafting, and especially if she wanted to craft like some kind of space related item. So those cardboard pieces that are crafted together, little toy structural items, are really, really cool. They worked out perfectly in this instance. And what's nice about this movie is it is one of the newer Pixar films, and Pixar, to me as a builder, is really great for showing backgrounds of the film. Pretty much every room from like the newer Pixar movies, they'll do like a full workaround. I believe that what they're doing is essentially creating like a 3D model when they're making the characters, and then they have them sort of walk around in the space. So they truly know what every wall looks like, how everything is placed down, and then as they have the characters move throughout like the 3D environment, you get a full view of everything, which means me as a builder, I can pick up how everything is supposed to be laid down and like make sure that all the correct clutter is against the right walls and really get some of those details that are supposed to be there. That's not true for some of the older Disney films. A lot of them don't match the exterior. A lot of them don't show like one side of an entire room, so you get to see like some details, but you don't get to see like one of the facing walls and things like that. With Pixar films, that's usually not the case. I can think of Up also being an example. They have a lot of really great reference in that film, so you could totally recreate like the whole room. Which means if you watch the film, I've really gone to like detail as far as trying to get all of the little things that you see in the background and placing them just so. I do tend to add things, especially because like I mentioned, I'm trying to make this look cluttered and somewhat small, but it is a little bit bigger than how it probably was in the film. So in order to make it feel even more confined, adding some additional clutter that's not in the film but kind of fits in with the theming is a really good way to do that. So I've given her some extra things and some extra clothes and some carpets and things like that in her space. But other than that, a lot of the details are pulled straight from the film, especially in this kitchen. This kitchen is one of those things that I totally remembered, like, very iconically from the film. A lot of the scenes take place in here. Food is a general theming in this movie. A lot of the characters cook or bond over food. It is Italy after all. There's lots of pasta references and lots of Italian references or use of the Italian language. So you've got to have a really nice, beautifully cluttered kitchen that's very lived in, very family friendly, and kind of unique as well. They don't seem to have a full-size fridge. They have like what I presume is not a mini fridge, but something kind of like relatively close, but goes by a different name. The chairs are all sort of mismatched. You've got some mismatched wood tones and textures as well. It has more of that vibe of hand-me-down furniture or furniture that's passed through generations. You're not trying to make everything super pristine like it's from a magazine. It's just, this is what we have and this is what we've always had. But it looks beautiful in its own right. Like, it's so cluttered and like beautifully colored. I was really excited to do this kitchen and I think it came out really great. I actually finally picked up the everyday clutter kit just specifically for this build. One item only was the reason that I finally made the purchase on that, although I will definitely use it in the future. Like, a clutter kit is totally up my alley. It's just that a lot of the items that come with that pack have been more modern leaning. Like, you get little headsets and hair dryers and things like that that I haven't needed for the last few worlds and movies that we've been doing. So I've just avoided buying it, but there is one wall item that has fishing rods hanging on the wall and I think a couple of like nautical decor sort of like underneath it. And it was perfect. It matched so well with the theme of Luca, but also specifically there's an item that goes just like it right behind the dining table against that wall right behind it there. So I needed to have it. It's not in the video today. I made do with some other things that go there instead. What's actually there in the film is some spears, but we don't have anything like that in the game. So instead of like hanging spears on the wall, I replaced a lot of those with fishing rods and I ended up using debug fishing rods. But once I saw that item, I had to grab it. Now, I don't own all of the kits. I own 90% of the build and buy kits at this point, and probably like one or two of the cast kits. I plan on picking them all up eventually, but if you're ever curious which ones you would need in order to have Disney Save builds or download the Disney Save fully, it is listed at the bottom of my Disney Save download on my Patreon. You don't have to be a patron to download it, and you don't have to be a patron to check out that post. It's always linked in my little description box on YouTube, so check it out there. And at the bottom of the posting, it tells you all of the current kits and stuff packs and things that I own, which is pretty much everything except with kits. It's a little bit more give and take, especially those cast kits. I don't own a lot of them, although I'm slowly kind of picking them up. My hope always was that eventually they were going to let us maybe bundle 2 or 3 of them together at a discounted rate, or they would eventually do a sale that included everything, maybe even just getting like 50 cents or $1 off of the kits. Some of them immediately become more worth it to me, so I was kind of like holding back for that, but I don't think The Sims is ever going to do that, to be honest with you. So especially now more so, I am slowly picking up pretty much all of them. My patrons immediately clocked me on the bed in the kitchen, so I want to just mention why it's there. It is actually shown in the film. It's not just something random that I decided to do. We don't know where Masimo's room is in the house, but I have presumed that it is from that ladder that is next to the bed. There is a ladder in the kitchen and there is an attic. Now, I think that because of how small this space is up here, and the dad probably owns the whole building, but he is using the bottom floor for commercial space. So I think his bedroom is in the attic, and that's where I put him today. It creates kind of like a confined space for him as well. It helps me with that cluttery sort of look in the smaller rooms that I was looking to do. And like I mentioned, I did find some official artwork of his bedroom, so I was able to recreate it. It doesn't show either way if the ladder is how he enters his room, but I assume that is where his bedroom is placed just based on like the research I've done from the film. And under that ladder is another bed. I don't really know why they have it there. I think it's a day bed, which my husband was very confused with when I mentioned to him. He said I was making it up. So if you've never heard of a day bed, it is just like a couch or a pull-out bed. It can sometimes be a literal bed that people keep in the general like living space. Sometimes it'll be on a patio or a green room. Sometimes it's in your living room and it's one of those couches that like pulls out into a bed, or sometimes it's just a bed that's placed in like a communal space and it's an extra sleeping area. I don't really know why people do it. I mean, there's many reasons that you could need it and use it, but at least on the east coast of the US, we call it a day bed. bed. And in the film, it's shown to be more of like a couch, but they definitely use it as a bed, and some of the characters sit on it as well. So I put a full bed in there. My thought was that some of the other characters can use it if you have any issues with like Luca and Alberto sleeping outside and using the treehouse, although like I said, I have play tested it, so I know that that works, and I know you are good for like the weather and things. It doesn't bother them to sleep out there, but in a pinch, it might be nice to have another bed available considering the 5 household members that'll be living here, including the cat. So that's not a mistake. It's just a little weird feature of the film that you probably didn't notice until it gets pointed out or you have to do a building recreation of it. The only difference in Masimo's room that is not true to how it's actually shown is that he does have a window above his desk, but because of the way that like the game mechanics work and roofing, and he's essentially in the roof and attic area of the build, I couldn't put a window there. It clips into the roof, so that's the only thing that's unrealistic to his actual space. I did put a window on the right side of his bed though, so he does have a little bit of sunlight coming through, even though it's in that really small crevice there. Giulia's house is actually detached from the one next door. What I have seen is that there might be some kind of a stone archway in between the two houses. However, that's a very small pathway, so even if I took some of the stone archways that we have and tried to like finagle it into there, it was going to clip through the walls a little bit too much for my liking, so I opted to just detach it from the building next door. The next Luca video will be the create a sim for the characters living here, which will be Luca and Alberto and Giulia. Again, they are all teens, but Luca and Alberto specifically are going to be mermaids. They're supposed to be sea creatures or sea monsters, so I did them a little bit differently than how I would do like a mermaid from The Little Mermaid. And I had been waiting to use like some of those funky skin tones and the scales and things to try to give them more of like an alien monstery sort of look versus making them like really pretty pristine sort of mermaids. So they are very unique in their own right. And then Masimo is the father, Giulia's dad, who lives here, and they have a cat named Machiavelli, so they will all be in the next video for Luca. I'm super excited to show you guys how they all turned out. Pixar can be sometimes hit or miss. They're very specific on their art styling, and I think Luca itself has a specific art style that's a little bit tough, so I really wanted to make sure that they truly looked as they were supposed to. And also, even though they're teens and they present a little bit older than how they physically look in the film, I still wanted them to look very young, and I did a lot of work to try to make them look that way. So that'll be coming up hopefully very soon for you guys, and I hope you enjoy it. There won't be too much more Luca content after that. I have one commercial lot coming after that is Luca themed, and it is a restaurant. I'm really excited. It's got a lot of stuff going on. I think you guys are gonna like that one as well. It's very unique. And then there's gonna be a townies video for just a couple of short characters, 3 townies from Luca. And then that'll be it for the Luca content, but it still ended up being like quite a few videos. I'm trying to keep videos pretty consistent for you guys, but to be honest with you, I am going through a little bit of a transitional period in my personal life where I am trying to find some other work in the UK and start working and just like get out of the house a little bit more. And now that I'm like here for good, just trying to transition into like what my life will actually look like here. So I have a lot of like little things that have been coming up, and I haven't been able to record audio specifically as much as I would like, which is causing the delay in videos. So just know that I'm always working on something, and if you want to stay up to date, honestly, the best way to do that is through Patreon. I always post works in progress every week, so even if new videos are not coming out, it's very, very likely that I have lots of stuff for you to look at over on Patreon to see what's coming up and what you can expect for the next couple of weeks. But usually when I record, I'm able to do a couple kind of back-to-back, so you should be getting a lot of Luca videos in the next few days. Now for this commercial space at the very bottom here. Because this is a residential lot and I am marking it as such, this space downstairs will not function, but you could, if you're not really interested in the Luca characters, but you are interested in potentially having like a retail location, there is a possibility that you could change this and mark it as a retail and run it as such. I don't presume that too many people are going to want to run a fish store rather than have this household, but maybe there are some, so I'm just throwing it out there that you could switch to the lot type. Initially going into this bottom floor, I was really kind of nervous about it. I didn't want to do this space at all. I've done retail locations and I find them to be extremely difficult if you don't have a lot of clutter objects that relate to whatever the store actually sells. So in this instance, he sells fishing equipment and fish. And that means that right off the bat, we kind of have a problem because we don't have like clutter clutter fish that is being sold, like something that I could place down as like a box of fish or a barrel of fish, I assumed. And then I really did a deep dive through the debug, and I was able to find one clutter item that kind of makes this space from For Rent. So thank God for Rent. Honestly, it's still a huge problem, and every day that passes that The Sims is like not totally fixing it, I just assume that we are never getting a full fix for it, which is extremely disappointing. I don't know what I'll do with the save file in terms of implementing rental residentials if they don't do some more work on it. But regardless of that, the pack comes with some really cool items, and there's a lot of shops and marketplaces in that world, so there's debug items that go along with that, and one of those being this really cool counter space that had various meats and very clearly some fish of sorts for sale on the market stall. That absolutely made this build work so much better for this bottom space. Like, I can do lots of clutter for nautical items and like little barrels and fishing equipment and hooks and bobbers and buoys and things like that, nets, which I did a lot of to try to really like fill up this space. But at the end of the day, I believe he makes most of his living from actually selling the fish. So I wanted to really have something down here that could work. All of the fish in the debug catalog are mounted to a wood piece. So it's not like I could have used tool, even though this would have been really annoying and really daunting to do so. It's not as if I could have even used tool to take debug fish and kind of turn them and then like lay them in a barrel and make these little decor items. Although I did think about it, it wouldn't have been a fun thing to do, and it would have caused the item count for this particular lot to go through the roof. So when I found that stall piece instead, I was so ecstatic to have that in here, and it works really well. The other apartments are fully like family friendly, functional, but the one on the very end, it's kind of like a gray brick building. It's similar to Julia's house in that the bottom floor was meant to be a commercial space. So I actually designed it to be a very small bakery. It's more like Italian bakery vibes. It's not super colorful. It's got like the basics in there. It's kind of darker wood tones, and there are some like theming in there just to show you that it is a cafe, it is a bakery. There's some little like cupcake things sort of around. If you've ever been to Europe or certain areas of Europe, but even just like when I went to Ireland and things like that, for example, or I was recently in France, when you pop into some of these like smaller bakeries, they're just so tiny and they're very much like the same thing in terms of what they sell. Each place will have like, it'll be known for its thing, right? Like there's certain places that you go for a certain item, but they all kind of give the same vibe and they look very similar. So I tried to recreate that in that space on the end there. So if you were looking to use this location for anything other than a residential, you could potentially use it for 2 different retail options. And some of those will be shown in the screenshots at the end of the video. You'll get a couple of little hints as to what's going on for the retail there, but primarily I wanted to focus today's video on the actual house, and I hope you guys do enjoy it. More Luca stuff to come, and if you'd like to support the Disney Save on Patreon, you can do so by clicking the link in my description box down below or the one at the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching today, and I will talk to you all in the next one.